Welcome to Always Real Talk. I'm Kwame Brown, and in our studio, we have my good friend Torie Sutton. She's from Emerge Tax and Financial Services. Hey, we all know what time it is. One, it's tax season. Two, we know that the CARES Act is out, and people are trying to figure out how to get their PPE, trying to figure out how to get their grant, trying to figure out how to get all types of access to money. And one of the things that they come across is what? Bookkeeping, making sure that they have their records in place. So, hey, in our studio, we have Torie Sutton. Torie, welcome to Always Real Talk.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, no, it's good to have you. Look, I know that this is and has been probably one of the most craziest tax seasons for you, given the fact that we have an epidemic with the coronavirus that's everywhere. Two, people are trying to figure out how to file their taxes. Three, small businesses and businesses are hurting in general. And then four, the CARES Act is on the table. Now that we have tax season is for some people it's already passed. Some people, they got extensions and they're trying to figure out how to file their taxes. What's new as it relates to this tax season?
Well, a couple things are new. For the first time in maybe my lifetime, the tax deadline was moved. So you've always had the option to get an extension from April 15th to October 15th. But this is the first time that as a whole, the tax season had been extended until July 15th. So that's one thing people should be aware of, that they have 3 months to not only file, but also to pay penalty and interest free. And I can't ever remember that happening.
Okay, now when you say they have 3 months to file, an additional 3 months to file, that's to June, is that correct?
To July 15th.
Okay, to July 15th to file, and any penalties will be waived, is that correct?
Correct. No penalties and no interest are accruing at this time. Typically, if you have not filed or paid by April 15th, then failure to pay penalties start to accrue, interest starts to accrue. But given the pandemic, one of the provisions of the CARES Act was to extend the tax deadline. Most states also followed the federal tax deadline extension. So most states have made their date July 15th as well. But you also have a chance to extend your payment to the 15th of July without racking up on fees.
Okay. And when people are now, delaying or not filing, walk me through with the CARES Act, because a lot of people are paying attention to the CARES Act and looking to see if there's another stimulus coming, right? They're talking about another $3 billion that might hit the street. And I know on the first CARES Act, when it came out, some people got left out. And there's been a lot of conversation of why small businesses, minority businesses didn't get a piece of the pie. Can you walk us through some of the things that you saw that could have been corrected that would allow some of those small businesses to get funding if they'd had certain things in place?
Sure. With the first round of funding, not enough of the small banks had access to money. And so you had your big hitters like Wells Fargo and Bank of America and Chase. And a lot of those big banks started to only work with existing business customers, and their best customers. So customers that had business accounts, maybe lines of credit, that had banking relationships, not just an account there, but they were a premium customer. And so Bank of America, Chase, and Wells Fargo processed a lot of those loans that you saw in the news. And so small businesses got left out. It wasn't all the banks. It was absolutely on the business owners. And I've talked about this. I made posts about it because it was so frustrating for me as a small business owner myself to see so many of people like me getting left out of this critical funding. And so one of the things that I have been preaching to people over and over was that if you weren't ready, if you didn't have your books in order, if you couldn't understand what type of business entity you were, if you didn't have a business bank account, if those were the minimum requirements to get a loan and you couldn't get over that hurdle, then that wasn't a bank issue. That wasn't an issue with the way that the bill was written. The onus was on you. And so that was just the fault of the business owners. But once you get past that, some of it was just about access and knowledge. So, you know, a lot of business owners aren't aware of the need to have that business relationship established. And then also when other companies like fintech companies, Cabbage, PayPal, QuickBooks started to, in the second round of money, started to post applications and accept applications and process them at a much quicker pace than some of these larger banks, people just weren't aware of it. And that came down to not having a relationship with an accountant, someone like me that's blasting news, sending it to the clients, directing people to funding. So it's about being aware.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I have a barber and some others, and I have a good friend, a childhood friend, and clearly he's in the garment business. He makes prom dresses, wedding dresses, and of course this was a busy season and no proms, right? Because all the schools are closed and no one's having a wedding, right? Because of Corona. So he called me and said, yo, just like this, because that's how he talks. Yo, the what is the swipe company? I forgot the name of it. What's the
Square?
Square. He calls and he says, Square. He did his stuff, got his stuff to him right away, and he was just amazed that he tried his bank. It didn't work. He tried Square, and Square worked. But like you said, most people aren't aware of those situations. Let me ask you a question. There is a possibility of more funding coming for small businesses. I know a lot of states have their own separate program. A lot of cities have their separate program. The federal government is looking at another round of funding. What can small businesses or businesses do, self-employed businesses included, to position themselves to be ready to take advantage of it this time?
Two things come to mind when you pose that question. The first one is to get with a professional that understands exactly what the requirements are, that understands the language. Because even if you get the funding, you need to understand what's required to get some of this funding forgiven, some of the loans forgiven. And so the language, it's not something that everyday people just know to understand. So there are going to be a lot of people that fall into a trap where they didn't understand words like incurred and paid and the timing of it, or how to calculate full-time equivalents, all things that are right in the language of the CARES provisions for this funding. And if you don't understand that, you're just putting yourself in a position to where you thought you were getting a grant, but now you have to pay it back because you didn't spend those funds according to the guidelines. So you want to get with someone that understands and knows what they're doing. And then the second thing is you want to get prepared now, not when the funding is already announced. So that means having your books in order, having your taxes filed, having an understanding of where to access those documents and where to access the funding, what lenders are going to be in place still. And the other thing that people need to have, and this sounds very basic, but a lot of business owners didn't have it, is a business bank account. If you do not have one, as soon as you get finished watching this, please go out to the bank and open a business account.
Now, I've heard that too. People have told me there were self-employed people that are subcontractors or whatever, and they didn't have an account. And so clearly they couldn't answer that question in informed to ask you your account so they can actually make your deposit into your account. What advice do you have for those nonprofits, small nonprofits, and those self-employed businesses right now that they can do that you saw wasn't in place besides a bank account, and they missed out on the funding previously?
Well, they just didn't have good records. So you had to be able to say how much income, expenses, how much payroll you had. I saw businesses that actually had employees, what should have been qualified as employees, but because they didn't want to pay employment taxes on those employees, they categorized them as contractors. Well, according to the CARES Act, the contractors can go out and apply for their own funding. And so, that took them out of the mix or lowered the amount that they were eligible for. So plan by the rules all the time so that when something comes up, you are prepared, you are eligible. I saw a lot of business owners, and this was heavy in like the cosmetology industry, cash heavy businesses. That they bring a lot of cash in the door, and they write it completely off. And so they were showing net income of $10,000-$12,000 when that they make more than that on an annual basis. So when they got their figures, okay, I qualify for so little. How am I supposed to live off of this? How is this supposed to help my business? Well, this is what you've told the government that you've lived off of and maintained yourself on for the last how many years. So they're just giving back to you the information that you've been providing.
Got you. And, as we move forward, that's why bookkeepers are so important, right? And especially for small businesses. I know people got Quicken and they got all these softwares and they, think that kind of works. But I think in times like this, when you need to know that and you have a short window to organize yourself to actually apply for these loans or grants or PPEs or whatever, time is of the essence. There were so many people applying after the fact because they didn't have their stuff together. Once again, we want to let people know, before in the program we had folks on and they were talking about the exact same thing, right? Beverly Winstead, who owns Winstead law firm, basically said the same thing. She said they are going to spend, I think they set aside $40 or $50 million on compliance, which means they are now focused on compliance and compliance offers. So, if in fact you get money and you get a check, be assured that someone's going to come knocking to look how you spent that money. And what I do not want to see is, businesses that really needed to help but didn't understand, their responsibilities once they got the money, and therefore now they're in more trouble than they were before they would have even got a check anyway.
Yes, and that's going to happen. I mean, if people think that there's just all of this free money being thrown around and the intent is just not to have any checks and balances, the intent is to recoup. So the way that they're going to do it, it's going to be on the backs of the little guys that didn't take some money and invest in people to help them.
Right.
So you have to play to win.
You have to play to win, but you also have to have a good bookkeeper on the front end. I got a question. How could folks reach out to you? I know you have a national tax and finance company. You do a lot of bookkeeping. How do folks find you?
You can find me at www.emergetfs.com. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram.
Okay. And as we talk about the next phase, and the next phase being clearly there's an extension on your taxes. People got that. People know that they are going to be there is a possibility of another stimulus for small businesses. You've given some great nuggets on how to prepare yourself, and if you don't know, go to the website, catch her on Facebook. It's on the screen. Take a look at it. Reach out to her. Also, we'll put the email on the screen also, so if you just want to send her a private email, you do that. I want to also say that you and I talked before, and most people that have a bookkeeper, kind of want a bookkeeper that's not in their circle, right? They want a bookkeeper that's, arm's length of everything that they do, for whatever reason, right? Because people don't like to share their inside stuff. We got that. That's why I have Torie Sutton on the show today. One, she's an expert. Two, she's real talk, and she keeps it real 100. She stays on top of it. She's, located. Where are you located?
Austin, Texas.
That's right, Austin, Texas. And she's good at what she does. So, Torie, I want to thank you for coming on Always Real Talk. We'd love to get you back a little later, especially as the CARES Act, if it gets renewed in any way, we'll have you back on. We always love to hear the nuggets that you have to share for our viewers, okay?
Okay, thank you for having me.
All right, you know what time it is. If it's Always Real Talk, you know It's going to be.